My niggas in the fourth quarter.
Let's talk some Big 12 ball. This is a football conference, but we're talking basketball today. We're going to start off with the top tier, which is team one of top tier is going to be Kansas. And they have struggled at times. They had a game a couple weeks ago against Arizona State where, Arizona State was pretty good, but it looked like Kansas would probably for sure win, home game for Kansas. And they didn't play good in that game. They couldn't shoot the ball. So, it was a combination of them playing bad in the second half, a combination of Arizona State playing good in the second half. It just didn't look good for Kansas. But this is a good team. Don't get me wrong, And when you talk about him, Devontae Graham, senior point guard, really running this team. He can step out. He can shoot three. He can drive for you. Pretty good defender. He's the main guy this year. LeGerald Vick has came on this year. He was not as much of a scorer last year. Only averaged like 7 points a game. He's averaging over 10 this year. Real good player. And then Mikhailu from Ukraine. This little white boy that just shoots threes a lot. He has definitely struggled in his past. But this summer, man, he got his three-point shooting down. He is an elite three-point shooter. He scores a good amount of points for them. And he's a guy that I never really thought would be a key part of this team, and he's definitely became it this year. Udoka Azubuike, 7-footer from Nigeria. He played a little bit last year. He got hurt, though, early in the year. He's the most important player for this Kansas team. Kansas lacks depth on the inside like they always do. They do have Billy Preston, but Billy Preston hasn't played a minute all year. Malik Newman, transfer from Mississippi State, has played, off the bench. He's came in, he's played really good at times. I like him. And Marcus Garrett, who's a freshman from Skyline, Dallas, Texas, he just looks really young. He's still getting used to the game, but he looks like he's going to be a good player. So this is not a very deep team. But I think Kansas can get it done. I like Kansas to win the Big 12 again this year. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if a West Virginia or a TCU comes in there and steals this year with kind of a down Kansas team to a normal year. They're usually a little bit more firepower than they have this year. Talking about West Virginia. Now, West Virginia is one of those teams that's just, if you look at them on paper, you'd be like, wow, this team's really not that good. This team's really not that scary. But then when you add their ability to press you, they get really scary. And then Javon Carter, who has just been – seems like he's been there for about 6 years now. He's back again, and he's got some of the quickest hands. He gets so many steals. He's definitely the best defensive player in this conference. And they have a lot of young guys. Lamont West has came on this year, who's a sophomore, who's played good. Sagaba Kanote, a sophomore who's came on. James Bolden played a little bit this year at times. But Daxter Miles and Javon Carter are the key cogs on this team. They really get a lot of steals. They're going to be the guys that take the bigger shots. Dexter Miles is a guy, he gets hot at times. He has good games, but he's really not labeled as that great of a shooter. And then they have Eza Ahmad, who's been out all year. I don't know what's the reason why he's out all year. I don't think it's injury related, but he's been out all year, and he was a really good player that came on last year. And so I think when West Virginia gets him back, I think they're going to look more like an elite team. So that's the kind of things I'm banking on. Teddy Allen has been good as a freshman this year. That's really their main freshman that they've brought in that I've seen play. Okay, so let's talk about TCU. TCU, to me, TCU, their ceiling is just so high. I think they're going to be a team. They're a team that I think won the NIT last year. So basically, if you win the NIT, to me that means you're the most deserving team to make the tournament that didn't make the tournament. So TCU probably should have made the tournament last year. They're going to be playing with a little bit of fire because of that. And they have a good team. Kenrick Williams, walking double-double, really good. He just does a lot of things well. Vladimir Brozniansky, he's 6'11". He's a big guy. Gets a lot of rebounds for him. And then Jalen Fisher, I swear this guy plays the entire game. I never see him leave the game. He's just a hoss, just working. He's not like some crazy great scorer or anything like that, but he just plays the whole game. He's a good basketball player. Alex Robinson, I think he comes off the bench, but he plays good when he does play. J.D. Miller, another guy that got to play some last year. And they brought in Ahmad Hamdi from VCU, another big man that's pretty good. I've seen Kuane Nui from Australia, who's a freshman. I've seen him play some this year. Desmond Bain, I've seen him play a little bit. But yeah, I mean, this team, before their loss against Oklahoma the other day, and to me, TCU looked like a better team than Oklahoma. Now, the fact is TCU doesn't have Trae Young on their team, but TCU looked as a better team than Oklahoma. And that's just how I feel, and that's why I have them higher in the rankings than a team like Oklahoma. Now, Texas Tech. Now, Texas Tech is a unit. Their coach is very good. To me, Texas Tech, they play like a small school. And when I say that, it's because Texas Tech has never been good. Chris Beard has been at small schools for most of his career. So they just kind of have this small team mentality. And they have a really good team, though. Zach Smith, who's a good rebounder, pretty tall, lanky guy. Justin Gray, he's a guy that's consistently been good throughout his career, and then Keenan Evans is probably their best player, best scorer. If he's going, then this team's going. He runs the team pretty well. And then some guys that they brought a lot of guys in this year. Jared Culver, I've seen him play a little bit out of Coronado from Lubbock. And then I've seen Zaire Smith. I've seen him play some. He's been coming on as of lately. But, and Nem Stevenson's another good player that they have from last year. A lot of seniors on this team, though. And that's another reason why they're kind of like a small school, because they have all these seniors on them. And so I think Texas Tech's going to be good. I think Texas Tech will make the tournament. I don't know how deep a run they can make, but I think they're a tournament team. So Oklahoma projected very bad this year in the sense, I'm gonna shit on Althon Sports for a minute. Althon Sports had Trae Young as the number 10 freshman, and they had him as the 87th best overall player coming into the year. So there you go for Althon Sports, how much research they do or how much they know. They have Oklahoma projected at the 7, and for them to make the NIT. This team's definitely a tournament team. They're going to make the tournament. It's just how far will Trae Young get them? It's going to be just like Stephen Curry in the tournament back in the day. You just sit there and say, well, if he shows up, then this team's probably going to win. So, and Trae Young shows up on most days, and to compare him to Steph Curry is just kind of bad because, Steph Curry was nothing like he was at this point in his career as a freshman. This kid Trae Young is heads better than Stephen Curry at this point in his career. Now let's see if it pans over. Let's see if he can learn how to play some defense. To me, he looks more like James Harden than he looks like Stephen Curry. He plays some terrible defense. He loses. He watches the ball. They play man-to-man, so he'll have a man, but the man will just leave. So he needs to improve his defense. That's one thing I will say. Very good team, though. And you talk about the team, the players on this team, this isn't a bad team. Christian Doolittle, Christian James, Kadeem Latin, Cameron McGusty, all these guys are guys that were on the team last year that played pretty well on an OU team that wasn't great but wasn't bad, that they didn't have any postseason. They were 11-25. They had some close games at times. This was just a young team last year. And Rashad Odoms, Jordan Shepard, Jamoni McNeese, all these guys are back. This is not a bad team. And then adding Brady Manick from Oklahoma and adding Trae Young, both from Oklahoma, really good ads. And it's funny because they're actually from Oklahoma. They didn't steal them from Texas. So I think Oklahoma can be a tournament team, and like I said, it's just going to be how far can Trae Young get them. It's not really about what team Oklahoma's playing. It's does Trae Young show up or not? That's going to be the key for them. So Texas is the next team I'm going to talk about. I've honestly been somewhat impressed with Texas this year. Now, they're kind of like the Tennessee Titans where, when they're playing a good team, they play pretty well. When they're playing a bad team, they play about as good as the bad team. is. So there's going to be a lot of that. They'll probably lose some games they probably should have won. They're going to be in some games this year they probably shouldn't be in. Talk about Kansas, talk about Duke. They probably should have been in those games, but they were somehow. And a good team. Andrew Jones and Kerwin Roach are some of the returning guards that they have. Eric Davis, has been all right this year. And then Jacob Young, a brother who's in the NBA. Forgot his name. He's another young. He was really good when he was at Oregon. But they have Jacob Young, who's a sophomore, and then some of their transfers or freshmen they have in that have been good. The freshman Jericho Sims from Minneapolis, and then they have Mohamed Bamba, who's definitely coming on as of lately. He's finally getting used to the college game, and he really looks like he's going to be really good. And then Matt Coleman, who's a freshman, who's played really good this year. He really doesn't look like a freshman. I like him a lot. And then Dylan Osetkowski, who came over from Tulane, has been a godsend for Texas, honestly, a position they really need, a 4. And, he can step out, he can shoot the 3. He's really embracing his role for Texas. He's going to probably have some big games throughout the year. He had a big game against Iowa State the other day. Now, a team you're probably wondering why I haven't talked about yet, and it's, Baylor. Baylor, to me, Baylor played really bad in the preseason. They really didn't challenge themselves in the preseason either. And then they're also dealing with some injuries. Jolau Akui, I can't say his name. He's number 0, and he's pretty good. He's a tall, really dark, lanky guy from Australia, and he's a senior this year, but he's dealing with an injury right now. I played Tech the other day. They got slaughtered by Tech. Manu Lacome, their point guard, really good player. Jake Lindsey, another all-right player. Terry Matson, a pretty good shooter. King McClure, pretty good shooter. This is just an all-right team. They lost a lot of guys from last year. They have a couple guys that were redshirted that are playing. Tyson Jolly, Mark Vidal. I've seen Mark Vidal play. I hadn't really seen Jolly play. But honestly, this team is really not, they were projected pretty good, but when you look at their team, this is a lot of guys that were on the bench last year, or guys that weren't really asked to be the starters other than, Manu Lacome. And so, I don't know. I'm not really sold by Baylor. Baylor's in a conference with a lot of teams that are overachieving. And I think they're really not going to be that good this year. I think they kind of finish more at the back of the pack and maybe a tournament team. I don't know if they're a tournament team. They didn't challenge themselves in the preseason well enough if they don't play good in the Big 12 to be there. And Scott Drew's a great coach. He's going to get them ready, but we'll see what happens. Now, Kansas State, Kansas State's lost a good amount of guys. Wesley Wondolo, DJ Johnson last year, but Barry Brown, Kamanu Stokes, and Dean Wade are the big 3 for Kansas State. The way they play is the way they go. If they're hitting shots and stuff like that, they're going to be pretty good. If they're not, it's going to be tough for them. And Barry Brown and Kamanu Stokes are both the guards, and Dean Wade kind of plays the 4. He's 6'10". He can step out, shoot threes. Xavier Sneed, who was a freshman last year, is definitely a guy that's going to be thrust onto the scene and playing a lot more this year. But those are, and then they have Cartier Diarra, who's a freshman who redshirted last year. He's a pretty good player. I've seen him play a bit. But I just think once they get into the Big 12 play, it's going to be tough for this team to compete night in and night out against these other good teams in the Big 12. Oklahoma State's a team that is definitely overachieving. It was kind of easy to say, they probably won't be that good this year with a new coach. But Mike Boynton's done great. They've honestly only lost to like A&M, West Virginia, and Wichita State. Like, they've really only lost like to good teams. So like, they're in a really good position at this point. Now Jeffrey Carroll is definitely coming on. He kind of started slow. He didn't get to play at first because of like some suspension type stuff or something like that. But he's a senior. He's going to have a huge year. He's probably their best player. A couple other guys, Devon Dillard is pretty good. I hadn't seen a whole lot of him this year. Brandon Averett has been good. He kind of comes off the bench. Kendall Smith is a starter out of Cal State Northridge. He's been all right. We'll see what happens with him going forward. Mitchell Solomon's been really good. He's really able to shoot threes. He can block. He can rebound. 6'9". He's a pretty good player. Tavares Shine has come on. He's played good this year. He's a junior. Lindy Waters from Norman, who's a sophomore, not a bad player. Cameron McGriff. I mean, just a lot of guys that are filling spots around, the star Jeffrey Carroll. So I don't see, Oklahoma State making a whole lot of noise, postseason wise. I think they probably end up not making the tournament, but definitely an overachieving team, definitely going to knock some teams off in the Big 12 this year. And then Iowa State, got them projected as last, but this isn't a bad team. It's just their depth isn't very well. Donovan Jackson, Nick Weiler-Babb are their guards. That they do a whole lot for them. Weiler-Babb has a good average in points, rebounds, and assists. He just does a lot for this team. Solomon Young, who was a freshman last year, is their big guy. And then Cameron Lard, who's a freshman, has played good. He had a really good game against Texas the other night. And he's came on. Lyndall Wiggins has came on. He went to Oak Hill. He's had some really good games this year. Those two guys have really been good. Jeff Beverly transferred from UTSA. I hadn't seen a whole lot of him. But the main guys, the newcomers, is Cameron Lard and Lyndall Wigington to go with Weiler-Babb, Solomon Young, and Donovan Jackson. And just like, Oklahoma State, this team is definitely playing better and is better than they were projected at the first of the year. And, we'll see what goes on with them going forward. I don't think they make the postseason or anything, but this is definitely a team to look at, going forward for the next years or whatever. But I think Kansas, is able to win it again. They're just a really good 3-point shooting team this year. They can step out. They're very fearless from the outside, and I think that's going to really help them win the Big 12 again this year. Another close team would be West Virginia. West Virginia has been right there for a while. And other than that, TCU is a good team, but I don't think TCU is in that tier 1 with West Virginia and Kansas. I think they're a tier 2. And then I think Texas Tech and Texas and Oklahoma are all tier 2 teams. And then, the tier 3s are Baylor, which Baylor is right there on tier 2, but they're tier 3 right now. And Kansas State, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State. They're just tier 4 because I think they're definitely not as good as the tier 2 teams, and I don't think that those teams are going to make the tournament, those tier 3 teams. Maybe one of them, maybe Baylor, if they let Baylor in or whatever. But it's going to be tough. And talking about player of the year for Big 12, got to be Devontae Graham. He's going to have a huge year. I really like him. And then talk about defensive player of the year is going to have to be Javon Carter. He's probably already defensive player of the year at this point in the year. Most underrated player, I'm going to go Dean Wade. Dean Wade doesn't get a whole lot of love. He's really not. I don't think he's really even projected as a guy that is a first team, Big 12 All-American, and I think he definitely should be considered for that. So Dean Wade's going to be my most underrated guy. And then newcomer of the year, Mohamed Bamba, but Trae Young is going to take the spot. Trae Young is definitely the best newcomer of the year, and Trae Young may even be player of the year over Devontae Graham. We'll see how that pans out.
I fuck on that bitch on my layup. I pass her off like a layup. I triple my cups like I had it. She come through late night on the Xanax. Don't tell me you back in that action. Don't tell me you back in that action.